Maybe an adult would step in and say something, but nothing. Not a word. It was like a wall of silence. Nobody was talking. The girl wasn't talking, and the other kids, it was like no big deal. Monday rolled around, and it was like nothing had happened.
Scene 16, the chorus of good kids.
I'm Hunter Menken. I've been studying here for 4 years at the University of Iowa. This is my 4th year. I'm studying theater arts, and I was previously studying mathematics as well. I was a double major.
Really?
But this semester, I decided that I was going to drop it to a minor. So now I'm full-heartedly pursuing theater arts.
And you started here originally doing comedies. I remember seeing you in a comedy.
Yeah. So the first show I was in, I wasn't even a theater major at the time. I was a biomedical engineering major, pursuing a completely different life, one that was going to secure me lots of money. But I auditioned anyway because I had loved theater in high school. It was always an outlet for me to explore my artistic side. And I auditioned and I got into a show called Role Models, where I was a model, which I've never thought I was model material, but it was interesting. There's some really embarrassing pictures of me posing as a model. But it was the comedic relief of the play. It was a very heavy play, and it talked about the struggles of being a model and the physical abuse you put on your body when being a model. And it explored that, but my character was just like a steady comedy line. There were a few serious moments, but not really.
And then it started to get more and more, you talked about math being and all that stuff, and
Yeah.
that's a big change for a career path.
Yeah, so the spring semester of my freshman year, it was really the chemistry that did it. I was in chemistry 2, and I was like, I don't like this. That's what biomedical engineering is too. It's all about the chemistry and how it relates to the human body, and I just didn't like it at all. So I decided to drop that, and I was going to do physics, math, and theater. And it only took me like 2 weeks to be like, no, this is too much. I'm not going to graduate in 4 years. I'm going to graduate in like 7. So I dropped physics, and I was just math and theater. And then I'm in a graduate clown class right now. And it really focuses on finding out who you really are, because that's what your clown is you, but without any barrier, without any mask. And I realized that the only reason I was doing math was to have this image of the poster child, like the good son that gets a degree with something that will secure him a job, and he'll be using his brain. And I was like, that's not really me anymore. So I decided to drop it.
And then at the University of Iowa, what other options, what other chances did you get other than just the performing? UI Theater also provides the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, so, sorry.
It's all right.
In the department, just for the major itself, you're required to do production lab, which is 3 semester hours, so basically 3 different shows where you're doing backstage stuff. So that's part of the major itself. It's required for you to do deck crew, where you're moving props between scenes, or costume staff, whatever you want to call it, where you have to clean the costumes and you have to repair any damaged costumes. Even in the Crucible, this is a perfect example. There was one of the showings in our final weekend where Abigail Williams' dress got stepped on and it was ripped. And the costume crew had to sew it up between 2 scenes real quick. They had like 10 minutes to sew it up, and they did it. So that was a fun challenge for them. And then you could do lights or sound as well. For me personally, I've always done sound. I just love sitting in the booth and being able to see everyone playing and just having to hit the space bar every once in a while. And this next semester, I've been asked to assistant direct Midsummer Night's Dream with a guest artist that's coming from the University of Idaho.
Really? Oh, I hadn't heard of that. That's great
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
And then you talked about the Crucible, in which as about as far away from a male model comic relief character as you
Yeah.
could get.
Yeah.
And you've also did Thebes and Arcadia and
Yes.
these other ones. How do you make that big of a transition from something as lighthearted as that to the Crucible?
You know, I mean, there's that age-old saying that drama is easier than comedy. There's like a really nice way of saying it. I'm not sure what it is. But those dramatic roles, it just comes from a different place. And comedy it's harder for sure to make people laugh and to really make it enjoyable. But it's about finding the beats and timing. It's really what it comes down to. So when you prepare for a role like Judge Hawthorne in The Crucible, you could find the humor in all of his lines. Like there's a line where he says, "But a puppet will keep 15 years, will it not?" Which means a doll will be around for 15 years, and that's his whole argument. That's what he's basing this witch argument on, and it's just the most outrageous thing if you think about it. So you could play it as comedy, and I think a few of the nights people laughed at that line because it's just unbelievable.
And Hawthorne was actually related to a real person, to Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Yes.
Did that influence you? Did you have to really take that into account, or did you stick with the script as written? Did you leave that out of it?
I think it's the actor's responsibility to truly understand the history of, especially in historical dramatizations, you really need to understand who you're playing. I don't go as far as Daniel Day-Lewis and live in the skin of the person I'm trying to portray. I don't go full method, but I think it's important, and I did do the research, and it was pretty astonishing to me. But Nathaniel Hawthorne showed me a lot of things because he hated his uncle, or grandfather rather. He hated him because Hawthorne was just a terrible person in real life. In the Salem witch trials, he encouraged people who were accusing people of witches to accuse more, and instead of just being an impartial judge, he would step down and play the role of, I can't think of the word for it, the accuser. Prosecutor. He would play the role of the prosecutor rather than just being a judge, which he was.
Yeah.
And he would always, he would phrase his questions to trap people. So like, there's a scene where it's all off stage and he's confronting Martha Corey. And his final question to her before chaos erupts in the court is, "Why do you hurt these children?" Which is, it has nothing to do with any facts. He just pulls it out, and that's something he did in real courts. So.
And something like The Crucible, which even though taking place events so long ago and written so long ago, still has a lot of real modern issues that it deals with.
Yeah.
Was there discussion during rehearsal putting that together? I mean, certainly you had to have been aware of that.
Yeah.
How much did that influence, or how much did it not influence what you were doing?
I mean, the ideas were there throughout. How do you present this play in a society that is post-truth, is what we were saying. I think it's important for a cast to understand the theme of the play and what you're aiming for, whose side we're on, because that's what the audience is going to see. They're going to take their side, but they lean towards what the cast wants them to lean towards. So we were trying to really build, what if everyone is right? Because there's evidence now, just a couple of years ago, I think in 2012, there was a documentary released on the Salem witch trials, and they found traces of a fungus that had properties like LSD. and that it had poisoned their bread, I think. So these girls who were accusing people could have actually been seeing these things. So you can't play, if you're playing Abigail Williams, you can't play her as someone who's lying the whole time, because then it's so false and no one can like her, no one wants her to win. So if you play it with compassion, then you can actually feel for Abigail Williams and see her plight.
And then at university here, you've also had some chance to do film work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole different way of approaching film work from theater work. Is that something that's easy for you, or is it just such a whole different game?
It's a challenge, I'll be honest. As a theater major, having most of my experience being on stage, it's hard for me to make everything smaller, because that's what you have to do on film.
Yeah.
On stage, you're playing to 250 people in a crowded auditorium, and on film, it's you and the camera.
And that's it, yeah.
And that's it. And they're usually medium shots or close-ups. And if you're moving your arms all over the place, then it looks ridiculous.
So what did you do?
Well, I'd heard it was the same guy. Figured he'd be doing it a third time, so I was going to make sure that he wasn't going to do it a fourth.
You were gonna make sure?
Yeah. You know, guy with a gun.
Okay, so what about a guy with a gun?
You know, the only way to stop a badass with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I made a video game 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it's called The 13th Doll. It's a sequel to The Seventh Guest and 11th Hour, which were PC games.
Uh-huh.
They were horror point-and-click puzzle games
Yeah.
from the 90s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was just an independent company, Attic Door Productions, and they were like, hey, we want to make this, and they contacted the theater department, and then they sent out a casting notice, and I replied right away. I was like, yeah, I'd love to be in a video game. And they did it in the style of PC games like Riven and Myst and Seventh Guest, where they film you on green screen,
Yeah.
and then they put your images in this three-dimensional world that they construct.
Wow.
And they're working on it now. It's they're releasing a demo in the next couple months is the projected date, but
Uh-huh.
it could easily be pushed back because they all are doing this for fun.
Uh-huh.
So they're just kind of volunteering time.
It takes, yeah.
And they have people working on it in Europe
Mhm.
and people in America,
Oh, nice.
across U.S. So you shouldn't have followed me, Doctor. It's not too late if you leave right now. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Only I can stop what's here. You shouldn't have followed me, Doctor. It's not too late if you leave right now. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Only I can stop what's here.
And then soon you're graduating.
Yeah.
So, what are your goals? Are you going to take the California route, or Chicago, or how are you gonna?
I don't know. I have no idea. When I first started the theater arts program, I was like, I'm going to Chicago because it's got theater and it's got film. And then last year I was like, oh, I'm going to LA, 100%. And now I don't know where I'm at. This winter though, there's a lot of theater companies that are auditioning for the summer and next year in general. So I'm going to audition a lot. And most people are gracious enough to go to Chicago and audition. So the main place I'm looking at right now is a year-round touring company. It's called the National Players Theater. And they go from the east, they start at the East Coast, and they go to West Coast, and then they go back to the East Coast.
Mhm.
And they do 3 shows in rep. So they're doing next year Around the World in 80 Days, The Crucible,
Oh,
and
I know that
12th
one.
Night. So one of the shows I know very well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that would be the ideal job, just because it's a full year, and they like to keep people for more than 1 year. So
Mhm.
I'd be set for a while.
And then when the freshmen coming in to UI theater, what do you tell them? What's the best advice you can give them?
You know, since I'm a senior and there's so many freshmen this year, so many, and there's so many good freshmen, I just tell them as much as I can, get out there. Start working now, start building your resume now. It's so important. If you don't have any grounds in working as an actor and you want to be an actor, it just won't happen. You need to experiment now because this is the opportunity you have to make mistakes. And if you're not working, then you're not going to make it. University of Iowa Theater Department is just a brilliant place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you become part of a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really tried to tell the freshmen that, if you need anything,
Mm-hmm.
tell any of us because we'll be there for you.
Yeah.
If you're having a bad day, I will sit with you for hours if that's what it takes to make you feel better. Because you have to trust each other so completely.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any breach in that trust, it's so hard to just reform that, especially on stage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's intimate moments on stage that take place, and if you're not fully trusting of that person, you can, as an audience member, you can see that. So it's, I think, more than any other major on campus, we're just the closest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what department could you even think of where, people have seen each other cry, people have yelled at each other, thrown things at each other. We've experienced a whole
Mm-hmm.
spectrum of emotions towards everyone that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get that anywhere else.
Happened. Do you know? You must know you were there because I don't remember.
My friend's friend's friend, she saw everything. There's the story that
Mary
people
Sue
tell
is
about
a
you.
good
And then
kid.
there's the story you tell about yourself.
There's what you believe.
My little
Not what you
Johnny
believe,
would never do something
what
like
you want to
that.
believe.